There were these small cubicles, and they would fit 2 people on either side. They had a TV, a console, and a VCR. Everybody made their station their own. There were like Gundam characters, there were robots, there were action figures. You know, this big giant Sonic that when you came in there, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is it. Like, I remember there was one we were working on. It was a flight game, and where, you know, you were just these little biplanes, and you would fly them through the city and different cities around the world. And, you know, you try and shoot each other down, and sometimes you would crash. And then 9/11 happened. Okay. So, I guess what I originally was going to do was sit here and sort of fake this sort of interview style. I even went on ChatGPT to see what kind of questions it would generate, and of course, it's garbage. It's not what I think anybody would really be interested in knowing about the industry, or my first time starting it, or anything like that. So I figured what I would do is just go right off the cuff, talk about it, and maybe have one of my speed art videos play on the side while we talk. So my first job in the video game industry was back in 2000. I had been working most of my life. You know, I've been a bagger at Safeway when I was young. I worked at a bowling alley. I worked at fast food. A couple honest jobs that I had was a hazardous waste operator at Richmond Refinery. I delivered pizzas. I worked at Funkoland. I worked for California Autism Foundation. And it was around that time where somebody had mentioned that they pay people to test video games. Now, I had been a video game kid growing up. I mean, my first system was a Magnavox. So, and I know some of you don't know what that is, and you'll probably look it up on the internet. But yeah, Magnavox, ColecoVision, Intellivision, Activision, or Atari. There you go. Let's tie that one. That was the correct one. Nintendo, Super Nintendo, PlayStation 1. And it was around that time, right after my whole spell with, you know, the Sega CD, the 32X, you know, a lot of that stuff was where the opportunity came up. So I found out where they were. They were in San Francisco, one of the older buildings in San Francisco. I can't recall the address right now, but they weren't hiring. They weren't hiring full-time employees. You worked full-time. You worked 8 hours out of the day, but it wasn't necessarily for Sega of America. I coming into this, I realized that a lot of individuals working in the industry were contingent workers. They would work as contractors. So I found the contractor. I signed up. You know, they asked me what experience I had, and I was like, I play video games. I love video games. You know, and I'm good at finding bugs and stuff like that. So they were like, okay. Do you know how to operate a computer? Do you know Word? And I'm like, yes. And they were like, okay, you're hired. So I was like, holy cow, like, this is amazing. Now, for context, most of the jobs that I've had in the past coming up to this, working outside, doing construction work, beating yourself up, or working with people who beat you up. Uh, and the hazardous waste job paid more at the time uh, than the contractor job at Sega of America. From what I knew, all I had to do was sit down in an office and test video games. So when they told me that they were going to pay me $11.75 an hour, I was like, "So this is it, I'm going for it." So I remember my first day, and the environment at the time was it was wild. Like, there were these small cubicles, and they would fit two people on either side, and they had a TV, a console, and a VCR. And in the middle of the office area was this big table, and on this big table there was about four PCs, and everybody made their station their own. Like, there were, you know, there were like Gundam characters, there were robots, there were action figures, there were little posters and stuff like this on the inside. I mean, there was stuff hanging from the ceiling, like jets and everything, and Sonic. We had this big giant Sonic that when you came in there, and I was blown away. I was like, wow, this is it. Like, yeah, like we didn't like for more context. And I know this is going to sound strange, but there was no the internet was out there, but it was not for consoles, right? So when you were playing consoles, when you were playing video games, you really didn't have anybody outside of your immediate friends. You would have your friends that would come over and play games with you, but you never really had like a big circle. There really wasn't like, large amounts of people. So to come in there and see 40, 50 people, all testing video games, all, it was mind blowing. So I made friends, and the routine, the daily routine was pretty much. I lived in El Sobrante at the time, and I would either drive to the city or I would catch BART and walk over there. And you get in early in the morning, and you grab yourself a cup of coffee. Maybe somebody will bring donuts, and you'll have yourself a donut, and you work on the previous project that you were working on, or there'll be a list of projects on a board, and you work on those. You contact a lead or something like that, and they would sort of pick through and decide who they want on their team for the day and stuff like that. And you would jump on and you would test. You come in a CD, you pop it in there, put your VCR in, and you hit record and you test. Sometimes there were some test cases, but not at the start. There really wasn't. There, if anything, there was something that somebody would sort of type out. You'd get a piece of paper and it'd be like a list of 10 things they want you to check. Like, I don't even, I can't remember if there was an actual database that stored bugs, but part of me wants to think that it was all paper. Like, you would write a bug out, you would print it, you would hand it over to somebody, they would redline it, and then you would make those changes, and then you would hand them back to the person who's working on the game, and they would look for it and make those changes. And I mean, it was amazing. Like, my first game was Sonic Adventure, and I worked on that for a while, and I found some pretty cool bugs, and I learned about chows and certain characters and stuff like that. And then And then we had a chance to work on Game Boy games. So, and I'm trying to think of the game that I was working on, but it escapes me right now. But I remember having these big boards, right? I mean, if you figure a Game Boy was maybe about this big, and then the board was like, it was, you would sit there and you would have it. Sometimes they would wrap it with cellophane, so no dust or anything would get on it, and you would sit there and test these games on these boards, and yeah, and then as you the the ability to show up every day, I think was a big thing. Uh, it was a job where some people showed up, every single day. Some people didn't. I mean, I had a wife and two kids at the time, so this was a big deal for me. I showed up every day, showed up a half hour early, so I'd always stayed a half hour later just to make sure that everything was wrapped up. And yeah, that's and I believed that hard work and determination and stuff like that would get you where you needed to be in the industry. So I worked hard. I found bugs, and we worked on some amazing stuff. I mean, and here's the thing with the industry. Sometimes you don't get a chance to work on what you like. I mean, I remember working on Floigan Brothers, and I did not like Floigan Brothers at all. Like that game, but I mean, I worked on it. Put my 8 hours in. I found bugs, wrote bugs up, and some of them were easy to find. Some of them were kind of hard. But then yeah, and but that was the start. And then there there came there were like three shifts, not three shifts, but like there were three events that really stick out to me during my time at Sega. And the second one was was the Ethernet adapter. Now, when we would get our Dreamcasts and we would look at them, right, there was this little side hatch on the side, and we would pop it, and it'd just be like this empty gap. It's just this thing we plugged in, and none of us really knew what it was. None of us really fathomed the idea of a console going online. I mean, there was Sega TV, but that that really wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I barely touched that. And there were some people who played it quite often, but I don't know how. Uh, so I remember somebody came up to me and they were like, "Hey, take a look at this. Plug it in. There's an Ethernet adapter down below. Plug it in and take a look at the UI." So I'm like, "Okay." I'll plug it in, and we're talking like we did both dial-up and we did DSL. And I remember, like, when you were doing dial-up, the UI was somewhat functioning. It was but I mean, it was what was crazy about it. It was like completely different lingo. Like, you know, I didn't know idea. I had no idea what a MAC address was. I had like DSL, like dial up. Like, what the hell is all this? And there were some people who sort of walked us through, but we learned it all off the cuff. And and we knew that So I remember working on that Ethernet adapter and working on the UI and working on the connection, and then that just led into this adventure of discovery. It was, what's online gaming like? What is it? Why are things glitching? Why are things moving so slow? Why are the connections so bad? Like, how do we make this? How do we make this run smoother? Like, And even the developers who were making games for it, when you think about it, like, you know, you would hit, you would either cash out or, you would hit like a memory limit or something like that, and then the game would just crash. So we had to figure a lot of that stuff out, and there was nobody before us to sort of pave the way. We sort of had to sort of set that up, and how we were going to test it. And at the time when we were writing bugs, we were writing them paragraph style. So reading a paragraph on a problem someone had or a bug that someone wrote up, like, oh man, I mean, like some of those are difficult, you know. But but we powered through and, you know, tried out some crazy stuff, and we played some crazy games. Um, and I'm trying to remember, like, I remember there was one we were working on. It was a flight game, and it where you were just these little biplanes, and you would fly them through the city in different cities around the world, and you try and shoot each other down, and sometimes you would crash, and then 9/11 happened, and it was a trip because I mean, one, dealing with 9/11, like that was pretty scary. But then and there was a couple days after that where we didn't really work much. But when we came back, this little game that we were playing, one of the levels in there was New York, and there were a lot of us in these little planes, and we were crashing into the Twin Towers, and we immediately realized that no, this was not a game that we could release. There was no way we were going to come out with a game like that. So we scrapped that idea, and then we started picking it up really quick. Like connections started getting really stable. Like the developers there, man. I mean, yeah, they were sharp. They figured it out. One of them, still a friend of mine to this day, Tom Fong, an amazing human being, an amazing guy, still in the industry. Hey, Tom. Uh, yeah, I remember him talking to me. And mind you, I've worked on some pretty cool titles. I worked on Jet Set Radio. Uh, we worked on that. There were, I think there was probably a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in there. There was a really cool fighting game we worked in there. But Tom had mentioned something to me, and he goes, there's this project we're working on, and you got to be hush hush about it. You can't really talk too much about it. And I was like, okay. And he was like, there's only going to be I think there was 6 of us that they fit in this room. So I was like, okay. We went in there, and it was an online game. And when we went in there, it was Phantasy Star Online. I was like, whoa. So what kind of game is this? He goes, it's a multiplayer game. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it was like the first console MMO. Like, yeah, there were multiple people in a room. You would pair up, and you would go in, and that was my third one. That was like, oh man, brand new. I was like, my mind was blown. I loved that game so much. I played it. I tested it for 8 to 12 hours out of the day, and then when it finally was released, I would continue to test the online stuff, and then turn around and play it at home. That's when you know a game's got you. Is when you can put 12 hours of testing in on it, and then take it, and then go home and play it on the weekends. And I remember collecting mags and raising your I think there were chow chows, and breeding mags. Like, man, I felt like it just went on and on and on. There were just so many levels. I mean, and granted, we're now probably, when you look at it, like it doesn't really seem like much, right? But at that time, I'd never seen anything like that before, and it sort of changed me on how you know how the gaming industry is going to sort of take off, where it's going to go. I had a good spell at Sega. I was there a little over a year. I think it was in January of 2001. I think was when we got laid off. Nobody really knew. They pretty much said that there really wasn't a whole lot of work, so they were sending everybody home, and so we were off for like 2 weeks. And my wife was a little worried. I was a little worried as well, but I had faith. Like this is, mind you, this was my first ever layoff. And it was strange because leading up to that, like during the Christmas break and up into November, they were having these sort of Sega Garage Sales, and they were you could buy big stuffed animals for like $3-4 a piece. Consoles were going for like $30. Like you could buy a console, a Dreamcast, with 2 controllers for like $30. So there were people buying just gobs and gobs of this stuff. And I mean, I had a wife and 2 kids, so I couldn't really buy a lot. And none of us really thought much of it, right? We figured they were just, getting rid of some, some backed up storage or something like that. But it wasn't until January that we realized, when they all called us back, that we had all been laid off. And it was one of the first times where I was pretty sad. I remember walking in there, and it was almost like the Grinch that stole Christmas. Like all the action figures were gone, all the things that hung on the wall and everything were gone. The only thing there was wire and string and thumbtacks on empty walls. The PCs were gone. Didn't really get a chance to say goodbye to very many people because it was one of those where you had a day to swing by. Nobody planned anything. There was no chat or anything like that. So nobody planned on a time to meet up or anything. So I remember driving down there and, picking up my things. I think it was just me and 2 other people. I really didn't know them much, but I wished them the best, and I boxed my stuff up, and yeah, and that was it. I was laid off. But it was one of the funnest years that I'd had, and I realized that moving forward, that was something that I really wanted to get into, and I really wanted to be a part of. Was that part of the gaming industry? So yeah. That's my Sega story. So if you hung around this long and you stayed to the end, thank you very much. Hope you have a good day. Bye bye.